It was Ken Bell who really initiated this interview. Uh, he knew that I was editor of the publication for the professional photographers, and I need stories all the time. So he was very good at giving me that, so that the story would get out some way. There must have been something that irked him. Either everybody was talking about Grant being credited with the coverage, and I suspect, I remember reading a story in one of the Maclean's magazine for photography, which mentioned, it was an interview with Grant and told about him doing the coverage. Now that might have been the thing which ticked off Bell to trying to say, no, we're going to tell the whole story. And he has a new interpretation with these automatic cameras, and so it's a new side or a different side, or a different bit of history that needs to be in there, and it explains an awful lot of that. How can I say? I did the story with Ken Bell and then sort of forget it. It was a story. I got to press on with the next story, and it sort of fell by the wayside. Then along comes Colin, and it's a new rebirth, new information. Because one thing he added in his book was that there was 15 cameras, not 6, and that was more information. So Colin gave an awful lot of history by personally interviewing whoever he could. And so that, to me, was, here's a whole new version of the story. And I sort of published that. But then I wanted to, I got, when you're peaked or something like that, you say, I might as well really take this thing apart. And the fact that I could do a page grab off my computer, I said, can I do that during a video and pull out pictures? And it was just by that. It worked. And with Photoshop, it improved. And then I was able to, that image against that image, against, A and B. So I did all those comparisons. And so finally all the evidence started to tumble out and be revealed. So, but it doesn't take anything away from photographers that were there, that imperiled their life. And because, particularly with Ruse, he points out that only 3 of them got off that ship. So they must have hit a very bad spot.
Okay, I'm just going to do.
My involvement with Ken Bell really started because I was deep into the Photographers Association, professional photographers, and he also was in there. He actually helped start the National Association, so I was just a young person carrying on. And I got to work on his national convention. He did a national convention in 1984, so I was on there, and so I'm sort of getting. My wife worked with him for a short while, and so throughout the years, we're not a family tied thing, but it's one of those things that you know him, and he respects you, what you're doing, and everything else. And I highly respected him for, he was a really good award-winning photographer. And in the militia, he had certainly rose through the ranks and everything else. But he was a photographer, young photographer in the Army. They actually induced him to join because he was shooting with the rollies and doing a lot of magazine work. Now, the Army needed public relations, good public relations, and they were not getting it with their photographers who were, here's a speed graphic, go out and shoot a picture, and give it to the editors. Well, the editors, looked at it a little bit there. But Ken had the Kenny, he had the Ken to know how to create a good picture, come up with an idea and everything else, and take a quality composed picture. And so the Army did bring him in. They actually went to New York and bought him a German camera, the Rolleiflex. So he was properly equipped with the camera that he used and was familiar with, and he used it throughout the war. And he did get an awful lot of good publicity in the Canadian publications, which the Army, they really needed. They needed some positive stuff. And so they were reluctant to let him go overseas. But finally, he convinced them that he wanted to go over and everything else, so they did send him over. And he went in on the second wave to go in, and he told me that he went in sitting on top of a tank, so he never got even his feet wet. So, but you see a lot of the pictures that he took on the beaches, captured Germans there, and well composed and artistic things, that magazine type stuff. But he found that with the Rollie magazine, the Rollie camera, it has a short lens and you can't change it and everything else, so you're fixed. So when the German tanks came in, he says, it's such a long distance away, you couldn't even dare take pictures of that. So he was young enough and eager to do it, but you didn't do that type of stuff, so I left it up to the other guys. So, it was the year 1994 that Ken Bell asked me to come over to his place in Islington and do an interview on this story. And that was I didn't know what the devil, but when I got there, it was completely new and different thing out of the far blue. I had no idea that he was going to tell me that story. But it started off with these automatic cameras, and I somewhat think that he was a little bit ticked off with this one photographer receiving all the attention for the coverage, whereas in truth there was an awful lot of other guys in photographers that went through the same experience. But at the same time, Ken Bell had this other story where it was automatic cameras set aside, which provided the coverage. And I liked it on the basis that it was a new slant on history. History can be changed so easily type thing. Well, I don't think that we really have come to an end on this story. We don't know what the automatic camera was. It couldn't have been the IMO. It must have been something else. And I've done some research, and I found out that there was a special cine camera developed for the American Army, and it's called the Cunningham. And this Cunningham is much bulkier camera. And the problem is, apparently, it put the photographer in a position where he was more susceptible to being seen by the enemy or shot by the enemy. And so it sort of comes in before the D-Day landings, and I think from the point that it was available, but I don't know. Now, I think the fact that this camera wasn't really used, maybe it was up on the shelf in quantity. And so it could have possibly, because it did have a 200-foot roll, it had an electric motor, So it could fit into all the things that we want on this thing. So I would hope that maybe this video might bring the Americans to actually open up and bring information out. So now, all that film that was shot by Canadian guys went into a pool. And it went out, and all the censors had to see it and everything else. Now, I'm assuming that after the coverage was there, the Canadians did withdraw their film and came back to Canada. Unfortunately, all that nitrate film went to Quebec or in Montreal or something, and there was a big fire and it all got burned. So we cannot go back to verify or find Grant's film. You know, his film must be there, but it's so-called, it got destroyed in the fire. Now, on that basis, if each country was able to draw the stuff, America should have been able to draw out their film, which as it turned out, these three films are by Americans. Somebody, and if it went go to the was it CIA now, but it's the earlier something before there. Now, if their archive has that stuff, maybe it hasn't been burned, so-called, destroyed. Maybe it's still there, so it may come out yet. But then also another thought. The bigwigs, generals and everything else, might have allowed all this coverage to fine. But after it was all over, they said, look, I don't want to be known or anything evidence to prove that I had all these Canadians killed or all these soldiers. Word might gone through to say, hey, confiscate everything and burn it now. So we don't know. It might never come to pass. But the final question I asked, why did, of the three films, why were they only Canadian? There was evidence provided that finally there was 50 cameras, not 6, not by Collins. He said there was 15. There was 50 cameras, so there's still a lot of mystery, and hopefully the word will come out eventually.